Welcome to the Golden Ancient Tales, where we bring legendary stories, forgotten histories, and ancient mysteries back to life. Today, we journey into the heart of ancient Greece to uncover a story of courage, ambition, and exploration, the story of Greek colonization. Discover how the Greeks, driven by curiosity and the desire for new lands, transformed the Mediterranean into a network of thriving cities that left a lasting mark on history. Before we set sail, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below. Your support helps us bring more epic tales from the ancient world to life. The story begins in the rugged, sun-baked landscapes of ancient Greece, long before empires like Rome rose to power. Here, the land itself shaped the destiny of its people. Mountains towered like the spines of sleeping giants, slicing the region into isolated pockets of civilization. Valleys were narrow, hills steep, and plains small and scattered. Beautiful, yes, but forgiving? Never. For generations, the Greeks had coaxed whatever life they could from the earth. They planted barley and wheat wherever soil allowed, tended olive trees that clung stubbornly to rocky slopes, and raised goats in the highlands where even the plow refused to go. But as populations grew, the land revealed its limits. Harvest grew thinner, famine whispers thicker, and tension among city-states sharper. In the bustling agora of Corinth, the crisis could be felt like heat from a forge. Traders argued louder, farmers complained more bitterly, and prices of grain soared higher each month. Here stood Lycon, the young son of a humble farmer, watching his frustrations boiled around him. He clutched a small pouch of coins, everything his family could spare, to buy wheat for the week. But as he approached the merchant's stall, he heard the dreaded words, "Prices have tripled, boy. Take it or leave it." Lycon stared. Tripled? But the harvest was terrible, the merchant snapped. And so is my patience. Lycon looked down at the few shriveled grains he could afford. His stomach tightened, not from hunger alone, but from fear. Fear for his family. Fear for their future. When he returned home that evening, the sun hung low, casting long shadows across the valley. His father, Theron, sat by the door of their modest farmhouse, sharpening an old sickle. Deep lines carved his sun-worn face. "Well," Theron asked, though he already knew the answer from the look on his son's face. Lycon opened the pouch and poured the small, disappointing amount of grain into his father's callous hand. Theron sighed, a sound heavy with years of struggle. "Another winter like this," he murmured, "and the land will starve us." Inside the house, Lycon's mother stirred a pot of thin porridge. His younger siblings watched quietly, their eyes tired and uncertain. The silence felt suffocating. But outside the home, in every corner of Greece, another sound filled the air, whispers. Quiet at first, then spreading like wildfire. Across the sea, there are lands of fertile soil. I've heard there are forests untouched, rivers full of fish. They say you can farm without fighting the earth every step. These murmurs reached taverns, temples, and markets. They echoed in the halls of kings and the humble huts of fishermen. They even reached the sacred realms of the gods. At the oracle of Delphi, kings and leaders gathered to seek guidance. "Shall we expand beyond our shores?" they asked. The priestess, shrouded in sacred fumes, delivered the cryptic words that would shape a generation. "Seek lands where the sun sets, where new cities shall rise, where fortune awaits the bold." The message spread like wildfire. It was the birth of a radical idea, a poikia, the founding of colonies. Not forced exile, not conquest, but a new beginning. City-states began selecting settlers, not just warriors, but farmers, traders, craftsmen, and dreamers. People willing to stake their lives on the promise of a better world. When news reached Lycon's village, everything changed. Representatives from Corinth arrived wearing flowing cloaks and carrying scrolls. They gathered the villagers and declared, by decision of the council, Corinth will send a group to establish a new colony beyond the sea. Volunteers will be granted land, housing, and opportunity in the new settlement. The crowd erupted into gasps and murmurs. Lycon's heart pounded. A chance to escape hunger? A chance to own land? A chance to be part of history? His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "If you go," Theron said softly, "you go for all of us." That night, Lycon went to the hill overlooking the sea. Moonlight shimmered across the waves like silver paint. He imagined distant lands, strange peoples, vast forests of life beyond anything he'd ever known. He felt torn. Leaving meant abandoning his home. Leaving meant risking death on the open sea. Leaving meant never knowing if he would see his family again. But staying meant slowly fading away, buried in a land that no longer had room for him. The next morning, he made his choice. He joined the volunteers as the Corinthian captain, Damon, read out their names. Damon was tall and broad-shouldered, with a voice that carried authority as naturally as the sea carried tides. To build a new city, Damon declared, requires not just strength, but courage, discipline, and hope. Those gathered whispered among themselves, "Is this wise? Will the gods favor us? What if the sea swallows us whole?" But Damon only smiled. "The sea," he said, "reward the bold." Preparations began immediately. Shipwrights hammered wood into sturdy hulls. Sailmakers stitched giant sheets of linen. Priests made sacrifices to Poseidon and Hermes, the gods of the sea and travelers. Families gathered to watch the settlers train with tools, weapons, and farming equipment. Some cried, some celebrated, some simply prayed. Lycon spent the final days before departure helping his father prepare the farm for his absence. They worked quietly side by side, each blow of the hoe an unspoken goodbye. On the final night, his mother handed him a small woven charm shaped like an olive leaf. "For protection," she said, "and to remind you where you came from." Lycon held it tightly. As dawn broke on the day of departure, the harbor was crowded with people. Merchants, families, priests, and children lined the shore. The ships shimmered in the new sunlight, their fresh sails billowing like wings. Damon raised his staff high. His voice boomed across the crowd. "Today we sail not as exiles, not as wanderers, but as founders of a new world." Cheers thundered across the harbor. Lycon stepped onto the wooden deck, his chest tight with both fear and determination. He looked back at his home, his father waving, his mother's tears sparkling, his siblings clutching her dress. He breathed deeply. The ropes were loosened, the sails unfurled. The oars dipped into the water in perfect rhythm. Slowly, steadily, the ship drifted away from Greece. The land of his ancestors grew smaller until it became a distant silhouette against the horizon. And as the wind filled the sails and the sea shimmered before him, Lycon realized his old life had ended. A new destiny had begun, and the world beyond Greece awaited. The morning of departure arrived with sky as soft as hammered bronze, glowing pale gold over the Corinthian Gulf. The harbor buzzed with movement, merchants shouting, families crying, priests chanting blessings. But beneath the noise, a quiet tension hummed. This was not just a voyage. It was a leap into the unknown. Lycon stood among the chosen settlers, clutching the olive leaf charm his mother had given him. The smell of salt filled his lungs, mingling with the smoke from incense altars burning offerings to the gods. Priests of Poseidon walked barefoot along the shore, holding bowls of sacred water and murmuring prayers for protection. Around him, the settlers, men, women, even a few older children, looked equal parts determined and frightened. Some carried baskets of seeds. Others clutched tools or family heirlooms. Every face held the weight of hope and fear intertwined. Captain Damon, tall and commanding, walked down the dock with confidence that steadied the trembling hearts of those around him. His bronze breastplate gleamed. His dark cloak snapped in the wind. "Everyone ready yourselves," he called. "This is no voyage of the faint-hearted, but fate favors the bold." His voice rose like a war drum. Lycon felt strength flowing through him. But then came the moment that made even the bravest tremble. A deep horn sounded across the harbor. The signal. It was time. Families surged forward for final goodbyes. Mothers embraced sons so tightly it seemed they feared letting go would erase them. Fathers pressed rough, calloused hands against the cheeks of their children, giving final advice in choked voices. Theron rushed to Lycon, gripping him by the shoulders. His eyes were glassy but fierce. "Remember who you are," he whispered. "A son of Greece, a man of courage. Do not let fear steer your course." "I won't," Lycon promised, though his voice shook. His mother pulled him into a desperate embrace. "Be strong," she said, her fingers trembling as they touched his face, "and return home if the gods ever allow it." His siblings clung to his legs, crying softly. Lycon knelt and hugged them tightly, imprinting the moment in his memory. He stood, wiped his eyes, and forced himself to turn away. If he looked back again, he knew he would falter. The settlers boarded the 3 great ships, sleek wooden vessels with tall masts and curved prows carved in the shape of dolphins. Sailors prepared the ropes, checked the hulls, and examined the rigging. Everything had to be perfect. A priest stepped forward, holding a carved bowl filled with seawater and olive oil. He lifted it to the sky. "O great Poseidon, Lord of the deep and shaker of the earth," he prayed, "grant these travelers calm waters, steady winds, and safe passage to their new home." He scattered the sacred mixture into the waves. The crowd bowed their heads. To sail without the gods' favor was madness. Damon raised a staff. "Settlers, to your positions." Lycon climbed aboard the largest ship, feeling the wooden planks creak beneath his sandals. The deck smelled of tar and fresh rope. He found a place near the bow, where he could see the horizon stretching endlessly before them. The sailors shouted orders. "Tighten the ropes. Raise the forward sail. Oarsmen, prepare." The massive square sail unfurled, catching the wind with a deep, booming snap. The ship lurched forward slightly, eager to begin its journey. On the shore, the last goodbyes echoed through the air. Mothers wept openly. Warriors stood stiff and silent. Children ran along the water's edge, waving small cloths in the air. Damon stepped onto the platform at the ship's center. With a deep breath, he raised his staff high. His voice thundered across the water. "Today we sail not as exiles, not as wanderers, but as founders of a new world. Corinth shall live beyond horizon." Cheers erupted from both ship and shore. "Oarsmen, push off." The first strokes were heavy and slow. The long wooden oars dipped into the water, pulling the ship away from land. Lycon watched as the harbor grew smaller. Faces blurred, then became specks. Houses shrank into dots. The mountains behind them turned into distant shadows. Finally, Greece became a thin, dark line on the horizon. He felt a sharp ache in his chest, but also something else, excitement, the kind that burns in the blood when one stands on the edge of destiny. As the ships entered deeper waters, the true nature of the sea revealed itself. Gentle waves at first, soft winds, a calm beginning to a dangerous journey. But by midday, the sky darkened slightly. Wind picked up. The sea roared. The ships tilted, rising and falling with the growing waves. Barrels rolled. Children cried. A few settlers clung to the railings and heaved into the water. Damon moved calmly across the deck, giving orders with confidence. "Secure the cargo. Tie down the loose rigging. No one goes near the edge without holding the ropes." Lycon helped the young woman steady herself, gripping her arm as a wave splashed over them. "Are you all right?" She nodded shakily. "If this is only the beginning, the gods test us early." Night fell with a blanket of stars stretching across the sky like the cloak of a goddess. The storm eased, leaving only rolling waves and a steady breeze. The ships cut through the dark waters smoothly. The settlers sat grouped around small lamps, sharing food and stories to pass the time. Sailors sang sea songs and rhythmic chants. Some prayed softly. Lycon felt the charm in his hand, warm from his palm. He gazed upward. The stars shimmered brightly, guiding them. It felt almost as if the gods were watching, floating high above in their celestial thrones. Damon approached him and sat beside him. "You handled yourself well today," Damon said. "Many feared the storm, but you stayed steady." "I tried," Lycon said, humbled. Damon nodded. "Remember this moment. A colony needs brave hearts, young ones and old." Lycon smiled faintly. "Do you ever get afraid?" Damon laughed. "Every great captain is afraid. Only fools aren't. The difference is, fear does not rule me." Lycon absorbed his words like scripture. As dawn approached, the lookout suddenly cried out from the mast. "Land! Land ahead!" The settlers rushed to the bow, and there it was, a faint shape at first, then clearer. A vast coastline stretching under the morning sun. Their new world. Their new beginning. Their destiny. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, revealing a coastline unlike anything the settlers had ever seen. Long stretches of untouched forest bordered the shore. Rivers glimmered like glass as they snaked inland. Birds with strange cries soared above the treetops, and the air smelled fresher, richer, full of promise. Lycon stood at the bow, breath caught in his throat. After weeks on the open sea, the sight of land felt unreal, like something woven from the dreams of the gods. Behind him, excited murmurs spread across the deck. Look at those trees. The soil must be rich. Look how dark it is near the riverbanks. Is this truly where we will live? Captain Damon strode forward, planting his feet firmly at the ship's edge. His eyes narrowed with the focus of a man weighing destiny. This, he said quietly, is a place worthy of city. The ships approached slowly, cautious of shallow sands. Sailors dropped anchors while rowboats splashed into the water. The settlers climbed in, gripping their tools and supplies. Lycon's heart pounded as his rowboat pushed toward the shore. With each sure stroke, the scent of pine and earth grew stronger. The gentle waves rocked the boat until, finally, the hull scraped the sand. They had arrived. Lycon stepped onto the land. His knees trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of the moment. He knelt and pressed his hand into the soil. It was damp and rich, thick with potential. The others soon joined him, some weeping, others laughing. A woman dropped to her knees and kissed the earth. A young boy danced in circles, shouting, "We're saved." Damon stepped forward carrying a long, bronze-tipped spear. In one swift motion, he drove it into the ground. "By the will of the gods," he proclaimed, voice thundering across the quiet landscape. "We claim this land in the name of Corinth. Let this place be known as Achaia Nova, New Achaia." A roar of cheers erupted. Feet stomped the sand. Voices rose skyward. They were no longer exiles. They were founders. Damon divided the settlers into groups. Lycon joined a scouting team assigned to survey the immediate area. Armed with spears and small shields, they ventured into the forest. The trees were tall and straight, perfect for timber. Ferns rustled under their feet. Birds chattered in the canopy above. Careful, Damon warned, we cannot assume we are alone. Indeed, no colony was ever founded without risk. After an hour of walking, they reached a freshwater river wide enough for boats. Clear water rippled gently, filled with fish swimming in silver schools. Lycon knelt beside it, cupped his hands, and drank. The water was cold and pure, better than anything back home. "This will sustain us for generations," Damon said. They marked the river's path and continued onward until they reached a clearing overlooking rolling plains. "There," Lycon said softly, "we could build homes." "And fields," another man added. Damon nodded. "Yes, the gods have led us well." By midday, the settlers began clearing land along the shoreline. Men chopped trees, women set up temporary shelters, and children gathered firewood. The sound of labor filled the air. Axes struck wood. Hammers pounded stakes. Voices called instructions back and forth. Lycon helped raise a large communal tent for storing supplies. Sweat dripped down his back, but he smiled through the exhaustion. There was joy in this work, purpose, direction, hope. Damon approached with a rolled parchment. "We'll build the first houses here," he explained, pointing to a sketch. "An agora will rise near the central clearing. A temple to Athena will watch over us from a hill." "Athena?" Lycon asked. "Why her?" Damon smiled. "Because wisdom will be our greatest shield." As the sun began its descent, shadows stretching long across the new settlement, a shout rang out. "Captain, people approaching from the forest." Instantly, everyone froze. From between the trees emerged 5 figures, tall, broad-shouldered, with skin bronzed by the sun and clothing made of woven fibers. They held spears, but none were raised in hostility. Damon stepped forward calmly, though his hand tightened on his sword. Their leader, a man with sharp eyes and hair adorned with feathers, spoke in a tongue the settlers did not understand. Lycon watched, heart pounding. Were these enemies? Allies? Something in between? The tribesman pointed at the settlement, then at the forest, then made a gesture of curiosity. "He's asking who we are," Lycon guessed. Damon nodded, slowly lowering his sword. With open hands, he reached into a basket and retrieved a small amphora filled with wine, a jar of olive oil, and a bronze knife. "Gifts," he offered them forward. The warrior hesitated, then accepted the gifts one by one. He examined the bronze knife with awe, testing the sharpness with his thumb. In exchange, he motioned to one of his companions, who brought forth a bundle of dried meat and nuts. The tribesman placed it on the ground between them. Lycon felt a knot in his chest unwind. "We trade," Damon said softly. "We seek peace." The tribesmen nodded, touched their chests, and slipped back into the forest. A collective breath exhaled across the settlement. "That," Damon said, "was a good sign." Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The forest slowly transformed under the settlers' hands. Wooden houses rose one by one, their roofs covered with woven reeds. Fields were cleared for barley and wheat. Terrace gardens grew olives and grapes. The smell of bread, roasted fish, and fresh herbs filled the air. The agora bustled with activity. Traders bartered pottery for hides. Farmers compared crop growth. Children played chasing games around unfinished buildings. One evening, as orange light washed over the growing settlement, Lycon stood beside Damon, watching the workers finish the framework of the first temple. "You've done well, Lycon," Damon said. Lycon shook his head. "We all did this." "Perhaps," Damon said, "but some men carry the spirit of a leader even before they know it themselves." Lycon felt warmth spread in his chest. Achaia Nova was no longer just a hope. It was a living, breathing city rising from the wilderness, and Lycon was part of its heart. Over time, the settlers built a cautious alliance with the local tribe. Barter became routine. Tribe members taught them which berries were safe to eat, which roots cured fever, and which animals were dangerous. In return, the Greeks traded knives, fabric, and pottery. Lycon befriended a young tribesman named Oron, who showed him how to track deer through the forest and find freshwater springs during dry weather. Their bond became a symbol of what Achaia Nova was meant to be, a union of two worlds. Winter arrived harsher than expected. Cold winds ripped through the settlement. Food became scarce. Storms battered the shoreline. But they endured. They shared supplies, huddled around fires, repaired damaged roofs. The tribes brought them roots and herbs that helped fight sickness. Without that help, many settlers might not have survived. And when spring finally broke, painting the land green again, Achaia Nova stood, weathered but unbroken. Achaia Nova had taken its first breath of life, and its heartbeat echoed across the sea. Spring had come to Achaia Nova, and with it, the sense that their small settlement was only the beginning of something far greater. Lycon walked along the newly built streets, watching children dart between wooden houses, their laughter mixing with the calls of traders in the agora. Olive trees and grapevines lined the paths, and the first temple to Athena gleamed atop a gentle hill, a promise of wisdom and guidance for the growing community. But beyond the borders of their settlement, a vast, unclaimed world awaited. News of Achaia Nova's success spread across the Greek world faster than any messenger could ride. By the time the settlers celebrated their first harvest festival, envoys from Athens, Sparta, and Miletus had arrived, their ships crowding the harbor. They brought questions, excitement, and envy. Another colony? Another challenge to the power of our city? One Corinthian official muttered under his breath. But Captain Damon welcomed the guests warmly. He understood that colonies were not just about land. They were about connection, influence, and the legacy of Greece. Lycon noticed the visitors' eyes widen as they wandered through Achaia Nova. The marketplace buzzed with activity. Pottery clinking, olive oil jars stacked neatly, and the aroma of freshly baked bread filling the air. It was a living proof that Greek culture could flourish even far from the motherland. Months turned into years. Settlers from other city-states, inspired by the tales of Achaia Nova, began to sail across the seas in their own fleets. Each journey carried families, tools, and dreams of establishing colonies that would endure for generations. Lycon watched as new arrivals built homes along the coast, each colony a mirror of Greek life back home. Streets were laid out in familiar patterns. Temples rose where the priests decreed. Fields of wheat, barley, and olives spread across the fertile plains. Markets hummed with the same energy found in Athens or Corinth. And yet, each colony carried something unique, a touch of the land it claimed. In some, the forest provided rare timber for strong houses. In others, the rivers offered fish that became a staple of their diet. Each colony adapted, learning from the environment and from the people who already lived there. Soon, a network of Greek settlements dotted the Mediterranean. Lycon could name them all. Byzantium, a gateway between Europe and Asia, where sailors from distant lands mingled with Greek traders. Cyrene, deep in North Africa, rich with fertile soil that promised prosperity and trade. Massalia, modern Marseille, perched on rocky cliffs overlooking the sea, where ships carried olive oil, pottery, and stories to distant lands. Syracuse, on the island of Sicily, destined to rival the wealth and influence of its mother cities. Each new colony became a thread in the tapestry of the Greek world. Each shared language, religion, and culture, yet each added its own flavor to the story. Trade became the lifeblood of these colonies. Ships carried bronze for tools, wine for markets, pottery for homes, and olive oil for feasts. Greek merchants learned the ways of distant lands, discovering spices, metals, and ideas they could bring back home. Lycon often walked the docks in Achaia Nova, marveling at the ships arriving with goods and letters from other colonies. He spoke with traders from Syracuse who shared news of neighboring tribes, with sailors from Massalia who described distant mountain ranges, and with artisans from Byzantium who taught new techniques in pottery and metalwork. The settlers didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas. The Greek alphabet spread across the Mediterranean, making writing and record-keeping possible. Stories of gods, heroes, and epic battles traveled along with olive oil and wine, planting the seeds of culture in distant lands. Even philosophy found its way across the seas. Wise men and women began to gather in colonies to debate, question, and teach. Temples became not just places of worship, but centers of learning. The Greeks were no longer confined to a small peninsula. They were becoming a civilization that spanned continents. But the expansion of Greek colonies was not without challenges. Local tribes watched the newcomers with suspicion. Some tribes welcomed trade, but others resisted the encroachment on lands they had hunted and farmed for generations. Pirates lurked in the shadows of the Mediterranean, preying on unprotected ships. Rival colonies competed for resources, and occasional skirmishes erupted over land or trade routes. Lycon remembered the stories Damon told him. A colony lost to a storm, another destroyed by a sudden attack, and countless settlers who never returned to see the motherland again. Yet, these challenges forged resilience. Settlers built fortified walls. They trained militias to defend their homes. They learned the ways of the land, understanding when to fight, when to negotiate, and when to adapt. Through it all, Lycon felt the pulse of a new civilization growing beneath his feet. The struggles made every harvest sweeter, every handshake with friendly tribe more meaningful, and every successful voyage across the sea a testament to human courage. By the time Lycon reached middle age, the Mediterranean had transformed. Achaia Nova had grown into a thriving city, with a population numbering in the thousands. Children born in the colony could recite Homer's epics as easily as those born in Athens. Temples to Zeus, Athena, and Poseidon stood proudly alongside newly built schools, workshops, and marketplaces. Greek colonies were no longer isolated outposts. They were interconnected hubs of commerce, culture, and diplomacy. Ships sailed from colony to colony, carrying goods, news, and ideas. Alliances were formed between colonies, and treaties made with local tribes ensured peace and prosperity. The Greeks' influence spread not by conquest alone, but through trade, culture, and example. They built theaters where plays were performed, gyms where young men trained, and councils where citizens debated matters of law and policy. Across the sea, Greek culture took root, influencing faraway lands and people. Lycon often walked the agora of Achaia Nova, watching children play, merchants haggle, and elders debate. He marveled at how far they had come. Once, he had been a poor farmer's son, limited by the rocky soils of his homeland. Now, he lived in a thriving city that reached beyond the horizon, connected to countless other Greek settlements, all carrying the same language, religion, and culture. The dream of colonization had become a reality, and he had been part of it from the very beginning. The Greek colonies became more than places to live. They became a network, a civilization united by shared beliefs and shared ambition. Trade routes wove a web across the Mediterranean. Knowledge traveled faster than armies. Art, philosophy, mathematics, and science spread along with goods. Even the distant children of Achaia and Nova felt the bonds of a greater Greek world. A boy born in Syracuse could speak the same language, follow the same gods, and recite the same myths as a boy in Byzantium. The Greeks had created not just colonies. They had created a shared identity, a culture that transcended mountains, rivers, and seas. Lycon realized, standing on the docks one evening, that the sea was no longer a barrier. It was a bridge. The horizon was no longer a limit. The world was growing smaller for Greeks, and in their hands, it became a place of endless possibilities. Achaia and Nova had been the spark. The colonies that followed would carry the flame across the Mediterranean. And in that moment, Lycon understood the Greek world was no longer confined to a single peninsula. It was everywhere. Life in Achaia and Nova had blossomed beyond anyone's imagination. The settlement had become a thriving city, with bustling markets, stone and timber homes, and fields heavy with wheat, olives, and grapes. Children played along the riverbanks, their laughter echoing through the hills. Traders brought goods from other colonies, and priests maintained temples to Athena, Zeus, and Poseidon, ensuring the settlers never forgot the gods who had guided them. Yet, prosperity often attracted danger. One morning, a lookout cried from the tower near the harbor. Ships approaching. 3, no, 5. Flying no flags we recognize. Panic rippled through the settlers. Damon, now older but still commanding, strode the walls, his eyes narrowing. Lycon, heart racing, grabbed his spear and joined the men gathering along the fortifications. Pirates, or worse, Damon muttered, scanning the horizon. We must prepare. The ships drew closer. Dark sails flapped in the wind. Figures armed with swords and spears leaned over the rails, their intentions clear. Fear gripped the settlers' hearts, but determination quickly followed. Hold the walls. Protect the women and children. Damon shouted. The militia, trained for such eventuality, took positions along the wooden palisades. Lycon climbed to a higher platform, surveying the attackers. The pirates were fast and ruthless, armed with bronze-tipped spears, swords, and javelins. Arrows rained down from the enemy's ships. Lycon crouched behind the wall, dodging them, then returned fire with a bow he had grown proficient with over the years. Around him, settlers fought with a mix of fear and courage, defending not just a city, but the lives they had built from nothing. The battle raged from dawn to midday. The pirates attempted to scale the walls, but every advance was met with resistance. Women hurled boiling oil, while men pushed back the invaders with spears and wooden beams. Smoke rose from small fires started during the attack, turning the morning sky a deep orange. Lycon felt a jolt of panic when he saw a young boy near the edge of the wall, frozen with fear. Without thinking, he grabbed the child and dragged him to safety, just as an arrow lodged in the wood where the boy had been standing second before. "You saved my life," the boy whispered, eyes wide. Lycon nodded, but there was no time for relief. The battle was far from over. Amid the chaos, Damon moved like a force of nature. He organized the defense, encouraged the weary, and fought alongside them. His bronze sword flashed as he repelled intruders, while his voice cut through the smoke and cries. "Stand firm. For our families. For Achaia Nova." Lycon, inspired by Damon's courage, felt his fear transform into determination. Every strike, every arrow fired, every shout of command was a defiance against the unknown. Hours passed. Sweat and blood coated the settlers, but they refused to yield. Slowly, the tide of the attackers began to falter. One by one, the pirates retreated to their ships, some captured, others fleeing into the water, defeated by the unyielding spirit of the settlers. By evening, the city stood, battered but alive. Fires were extinguished, walls repaired, and the wounded tended. Lycon, leaning against a newly repaired section of palisade, breathed deeply. "We survived," he whispered. "Yes," Damon replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "But we must learn. This city will be tested again. Always be ready." In the weeks following the attack, Achaia Nova transformed from a city under siege to a city stronger than ever. The settlers rebuilt homes with sturdier wood. The walls were reinforced with stone where possible. Training drills became routine. Every citizen, regardless of age or occupation, learned to defend their home. Lycon spent hours patrolling the perimeter, teaching young men how to hold a spear and aim a bow. He trained alongside women, learning how to manage defenses during emergencies. Every day, he reminded himself, survival depended on preparation as much as courage. Even amidst hardship, life persisted. Fields were replanted, markets reopened, and festivals returned, though tempered by the memory of danger. Children laughed again, merchants traded cautiously, and priests offered prayers of gratitude for their continued survival. The attack also forced the settlers to consider diplomacy more seriously. Lycon and Damon led envoys to nearby tribes, seeking alliances and establishing trade agreements. Gifts of olive oil, pottery, and bronze tools were offered, while the Greeks learned local knowledge of hunting, herbs, and navigation. Through these exchanges, a bond formed. Local tribes became guides and allies, warning settlers of threats and assisting in defense when needed. Lycon grew close to Oron, the young tribesman who had taught him tracking skills in earlier years. Together, they strengthened the settlement's security and ensured the colony's survival. "We fight as one," Oron said one evening, standing atop the fortifications. Greek and local, against those who would destroy life, not build it. Lycon nodded. "And together, we will endure anything." The attack on Achaia Nova became a defining moment for the colony. The settlers learned that the sea and foreign lands offered opportunity, but also danger. They learned to adapt, to defend, and to value alliances. They understood that survival was not merely about strength, but about courage, unity, and wisdom. Lycon reflected on the journey from his homeland to this new world. Once, he had feared leaving Greece, uncertain of what lay beyond the horizon. Now, he understood that the risk had been necessary. Without venturing into the unknown, there would be no city, no colonies, and no legacy. Each plank of the repaired walls, each fortified gate, and each safe night under the stars was a testament to the settlers' perseverance. Lycon realized that Greek colonization was more than planting seeds in foreign soil. It was about planting courage, resilience, and hope. Months passed. The city regained its rhythm, stronger and more organized than before. Training became a way of life. Trade continued. Festivals honored both the gods and the bravery of those who had defended the city. Standing atop the main gate one evening, Lycon gazed out at the sea. Ships of other colonies appeared on the horizon, signaling that Greek expansion was still underway. He understood then that Achaia Nova was more than a city. It was a beacon of possibility, a symbol of what courage and unity could achieve. "We have survived," Lycon said softly to Damon, "and we will thrive." "Yes," Damon replied, eyes fixed on the setting sun. "The world beyond these shores is vast, but we are ready. Our legacy will endure." For the settlers of Achaia Nova, life was no longer just about survival. It was about creating a civilization that could withstand storms, attacks, and the test of time. The colony would continue to grow, influencing the Mediterranean for generations to come. And through it all, Lycon felt pride, not only in his own courage, but in the courage of everyone who had dared to leave the familiar behind and forge a new life across the sea. Achaia Nova had survived its first great test. The settlers had learned the most important lesson of all. To thrive in a new world, one must face danger, embrace unity, and endure with unwavering courage. Years had passed since the first settlers had arrived at Achaia Nova. The one small settlement had blossomed into a thriving city, its streets echoing with life and clamor of commerce. Wooden homes had been replaced with stone, and the agora, the heart of civic life, was now lined with marble columns, bustling with traders, scholars, and citizens discussing philosophy, trade, and governance. Lycon walked to the marketplace one warm afternoon, the sun glinting off the polished bronze of merchants' goods. Children ran between stalls, shouting greetings to familiar faces. The smell of baked bread mingled with Olive's fresh fish and the fragrant smoke of herbs. He paused to watch a potter's apprentice shaping clay on a spinning wheel. This was not just survival anymore, it was civilization. Greek colonies were no longer isolated outposts. They had become interconnected centers of influence, trade, and culture. Ships traveled between colonies, carrying olive oil, wine, pottery, and the shared ideals of Greek society. The colonies preserved language, religion, and customs while adapting to the lands they occupied. Lycon remembered the early days, when fear and uncertainty had dominated their lives. Now, colonies were self-sustaining, yet remained connected through trade and shared heritage. News traveled along the Mediterranean like fire, spreading stories of discovery, achievement, and sometimes tragedy. Achaia Nova itself had become a model for new colonies. Cities like Syracuse, Massalia, and Byzantium emulated its organization and planning, following its example in architecture, trade, and governance. The Greeks' influence stretched across the Mediterranean, linking people, culture, and commerce in a vast network that seemed unstoppable. Lycon joined a council meeting in the Agora, where leaders discussed plans for expansion, trade agreements, and city defenses. Damon presided at the center, still commanding respect with his steady presence. New settlers arrive each month, Damon said. We must ensure they are integrated, trained, and prepared for the challenges ahead. Our strength lies in unity, not isolation. Lycon spoke up. We should send envoys to the newer colonies. Share knowledge of defense and farming techniques. Teach them the importance of alliances with the local tribes. A murmured agreement swept through the council. They understood that the Greek world was only secure if every colony could thrive, adapt, and survive. The council voted to establish schools for young citizens, workshops for craftsmen, and forums for philosophers. Temples remained central, but learning, innovation, and civic duty now defined the city as much as worship. Greek colonies were not just about survival. They were about spreading culture and ideas. Lycon watched as poets recited verses in the open air. Philosophers debated ethics and governance, and musicians played lyres that carried melodies across the marketplace. Greek art, architecture, and literature flourished, blending with local traditions. Sculptors created statues honoring gods and heroes, while painters depicted scenes of daily life in the colonies. The Greeks' reverence for knowledge and beauty transcended borders, inspiring locals and settlers alike. Lycon found himself particularly fascinated by the philosophers who arrived from distant colonies. They spoke of governance, morality, and the balance between freedom and order. He listened for hours, absorbing lessons that would guide him not just as a citizen, but as a mentor to the next generation. Despite the prosperity, the colonies faced challenges from external threats and rival powers. Pirates still prowled the Mediterranean, and neighboring tribes sometimes grew restless. But Lycon and Damon had learned the power of alliances. They maintained strong ties with friendly tribes, offering trade and mutual defense. In return, these allies provided knowledge of the land, early warnings of danger, and assistance during conflicts. The Greek colonies had learned that diplomacy could be as powerful as swords. One afternoon, Lycon and Oron, his friend from the local tribes, stood atop the city walls overlooking the harbor. "Do you ever fear the sea, Lycon?" Oron asked, scanning the horizon where ships sail between colonies. "Sometimes," Lycon admitted, "but I have learned that fear teaches us to prepare, to adapt. The sea is no longer just a threat. It is a pathway, a bridge connecting all our worlds." Oron nodded. "Then we have built something worth defending and worth protecting for generations." Achaia Nova had become a city where children could grow, learn, and dream without fear. Lycon often walked among them, observing their curiosity and courage. Young boys and girls trained with wooden swords and practiced farming alongside adults. They learned stories of Greek heroes, the deeds of gods, and the history of the colonies. Lycon felt a quiet pride in the next generation. They would inherit the fruits of the settlers' labor and, in turn, shape the future of the Greek world. Their education, courage, and understanding of alliances ensured that the legacy of colonization would endure. The children of Achaia Nova represented the very essence of Greek expansion, a blend of homegrown courage, cultural heritage, and adaptability. They were proof that civilization could thrive, even far from the familiar shores of Greece. One evening, Lycon stood at the top of the highest tower, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. He remembered the first voyage across the sea, the fear of leaving home, and the struggles of survival. He recalled the storms, the pirates, the harsh winters, and the days when hope seemed almost impossible. And yet, here he stood, a witness to the triumph of human determination. The colonies were more than settlements. They were a legacy, a bridge connecting distant lands through culture, trade, and shared ideals. Every ship that sailed from Achaia Nova carried not just goods, but knowledge, philosophy, and the essence of Greek civilization. Lycon smiled as he looked toward the horizon. The colonies he had helped build would continue to grow, influence, and thrive long after he was gone. Greek colonization had become a force that could not be ignored. It shaped the Mediterranean world, connecting people, ideas, and cultures in ways that few could imagine. From the rugged hills of Greece to the fertile plains of Sicily, from the shores of North Africa to the distant coasts of Massalia, Greek colonies were everywhere, a testament to courage, adaptability, and vision. And at the heart of it all, Lycon understood this truth. The journey was never just about land. It was about people, culture, unity, and the enduring spirit of exploration. The settlers' bravery had created a network of thriving communities that would influence history for centuries. As night fell over Achaia Nova, lanterns glimmered along the streets, and the sound of laughter, music, and conversation filled the air. The city had endured storms, pirates, and the uncertainty of the unknown, yet it thrived. Greek civilization was no longer confined to the peninsula of its birth. It spread across the Mediterranean, leaving a legacy that would last for generations. And Lycon, once a young boy clutching an olive-leaf charm in a distant harbor, had been there from beginning. He had helped shape a world beyond imagination. Years had passed since the first settlers had set foot on the shores of Achaia Nova. Lycon, now a seasoned man with streaks of silver in his hair, walked along the city walls at dawn. The city below him was alive. Markets opening, children laughing, artisans hammering bronze, and priests tending the temples. The scent of bread, olive oil, and salt water drifted on the morning breeze. From the harbor, ships were preparing for their next voyages. The Mediterranean had become a network of Greek colonies, each connected by trade, culture, and shared knowledge. The waves carried not just goods, but stories, ideas, and the enduring spirit of the Greek people. Lycon's gaze traveled to the horizon, where the first light of the sun kissed the distant waters. He thought of the day he had left his homeland, the fear, the hope, the uncertainty. And now, centuries of Greek expansion had made the world a smaller, interconnected place. Lycon recalled the first weeks on the uncharted shore, the soil, the forests, the wild rivers, and the challenges of survival. He remembered Damon's unwavering leadership, the courage of the settlers, and the guidance of the gods that had carried them through storms and trials. The colony had faced pirates, harsh winters, and unfamiliar lands, yet it endured. Achaia Nova had grown stronger after every challenge, forging a culture that balanced Greek traditions with the wisdom gained from local tribes. The world beyond Greece is not empty. Damon had once told him long ago, it is full of opportunity, danger, and knowledge. The brave shall shape it. Lycon now understood the truth of those words. The colonies were more than cities. They were the embodiment of courage, adaptation, and vision. In the agora, children trained with wooden spears and practiced debates on justice and governance. Young men and women learned farming, trade, and defense, guided by elders who had survived storms, battles, and the uncertainty of the unknown. Lycon watched a group of youths discussing the layout of a new settlement. They argued passionately, drawing sketches in sand, imagining roads, houses, and temples. Their eyes sparkled with the same fire that had driven him to leave his homeland decades ago. "This is the future," Lycon whispered to Oron, now older but still strong. "They will carry our work further than we ever imagined." Oron smiled. "And they will remember the lessons of courage and unity. The legacy is in their hands now." The Greek colonies were no longer isolated outposts. They had become a network of interconnected cities, linked by trade routes and shared culture. Diplomacy and alliances ensured peace with local tribes, while trade with distant lands brought wealth, resources, and knowledge. Lycon walked to the council hall, where representatives from neighboring colonies discussed treaties, shared innovations in farming, navigation, and architecture, and debated philosophies of governance. "Unity is our strength," Lycon said, addressing the council. "Our colonies endure because we support one another, learn from each other, and share knowledge. Let this be our guiding principle for generations to come." The council agreed. Greek civilization was no longer confined to a peninsula. It was a culture that spanned the Mediterranean, strong and resilient. Greek art, music, philosophy, and religion flourished across the colonies. Temples to Athena, Zeus, and Poseidon were built in every settlement, yet learning and innovation were equally revered. Scholars debated ethics, governance, and science in forums open to all citizens. Lycon often visited the schools and libraries, watching children recite Homer's epics and learn mathematics. Poets recited tales of heroes and gods, while artists sculpted statues that captured both human beauty and divine inspiration. He realized that Greek colonization was more than planting cities. It was planting culture, knowledge, and civilization in foreign lands. Every colony was a seed that would bear fruit for centuries. Of course, the journey was not without obstacles. Storms still threatened coastal settlements, and rival powers occasionally tested the colony's defenses. But the lessons learned over decades of expansion had created resilient, adaptable communities. Settlers learned to read the skies, navigate treacherous waters, and cultivate the land efficiently. They trained militias, formed alliances with local tribes, and established systems of governance that balance authority and citizen participation. Every challenge had strengthened them, teaching lessons of perseverance, unity, and courage. Lycon understood that the colony's true power was not in wealth or military might, but in the character and determination of their people. Standing atop the highest tower one evening, Lycon watched ships depart for new horizons. Young settlers were embarking on journeys to establish colonies farther than any Greek had ventured before. The sea, once a barrier, had become a bridge. Each voyage carried not only settlers and supplies, but also ideas, knowledge, and culture. Every new colony built upon the lessons of those before it, expanding the reach of Greek civilization and uniting distant lands under shared traditions. Lycon felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had been there at the very beginning, when fear and hope intertwined on the shores of an unknown world. And now, Greek influence stretched across continents, shaping trade, culture, and history. As night fell over Achaia Nova, lanterns glimmered in the streets, and the sound of music and conversation filled the air. The city had endured storms, pirate attacks, and the hardships of survival, yet it thrived. Lycon walked along the harbor, where the reflection of moonlight shimmered on the gentle waves. He thought of the generations to come, of children who would grow, explore, and create new colonies of their own. Greek colonization had become more than an act of expansion. It was a foundation of a civilization that would endure, adapt, and inspire for centuries. Every stone laid, every trade route established, and every life touched by this expansion contributed to a legacy larger than any one man. Lycon raised his eyes to the stars, remembering the first night he had looked at the horizon from his homeland, wondering what lay beyond. Now, the stars shone over countless Greek colonies, each one a testament to courage, vision, and perseverance. The Greek world was no longer confined to its peninsula. It stretched across the Mediterranean, uniting lands, people, and ideas. Its influence would be felt for generations to come, in art, architecture, philosophy, politics, and the enduring spirit of exploration. Lycon smiled, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders and the lightness of accomplishment in his heart. The journey that had begun with fear and hope had transformed into a civilization that would leave a lasting mark on the world. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and the Greek colonies, born of courage and guided by wisdom, would shine across the Mediterranean for centuries to come.